doing.
I see.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself, Lex?
Okay, the short introduction, take two. I'm a software engineer working remotely in Victoria, BC, so I'm not affected as much currently yet. Hopefully it stays this way. And I have about 20 years of experience, most of it as software engineer. And I don't want to go into the managements because I do like writing code. And yeah, and also the important bit, I guess, is that I'm a part of the third generation of software engineers in my family. So I have a bit of a history perspective onto the profession.
That's awesome. So was that what drove you into software engineering? Was because you were you've seen it your entire life?
No, that was the reverse. Essentially, I'm sure if I ever told you, but part of my rebellion, like the regular like late teenage rebellion, is that I didn't want to to have anything to do with it. So I applied to the university and I finished degree in optoelectronics engineering, which is totally unrelated in my mind. I thought it would be totally unrelated, but essentially because I could code, towards like finishing the degree, I was writing lots of software to simulate that system, simulate that other system, to process the results, and all of that stuff. So I ended up writing code anyways. So that's how I went to that profession.
Nice. So what's the coolest project that you're working on right now?
Do you want me to talk again about that one, the Minecraft?
Sure.
Okay. So the coolest project I'm thinking about right now, and just like it's in design phase essentially, is to visualize some code base as a Minecraft map, so that people would walk around the code that they've written, explore, and see what's ugly and needs to be fixed visually. Not just like, well, yeah, there is like some huge class somewhere, lots of lines of code. Once you see it, then it will be better. And also, I'm thinking of like, if you could make it a map and a game, and then if you know that there's a bug in the line, you can make like it's a spawn location for some angry mobs at that point. It's just a rough idea right yet, but I think it will be pretty cool if I end up doing it.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's go over to the lines. It seems as though we have got some people that are on the stream and watching right now. Michaela, any questions for our awesome guest, Lex? I do love that.
Is it on Twitch or is it somewhere else?
No, so we're live on it's like the IBM video.
Oh, IBM thing. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I can send you the link.
Sure. I'll see the like at least.
Where are we hiding? Ooh, there we go. So we got a question from Michaela. What do you find the most difficult and the most rewarding part of your job?
That's a very good question. Because it's difficult. There are different areas, and I really like when it's difficult. So it's also the part that I enjoy the most. So quite often, there is a lot of work already done in a certain area. So you don't start with something from scratch when you just like have an idea and work on it. There is a lot of history. And the most difficult part to me is that I will go and read past conversation, read past code, history of commits, all of that to gather the understanding and like peek into the mind of whoever was the developer who wrote or worked on that system before me. What were they thinking? Why they did it a certain way? How could I? Because usually there is some reason for me to look at the code, like I want to fix some bug or make an improvement. How can I make it such that it fits their way of thinking, such as that it's not something totally alien to the code base? At times it's very challenging because people have different ideas and way to express themselves in the comments. Sometimes it's actually very rewarding and a lot of fun. There is one game that I read the whole source code of it just because the author of it was so great with writing the comments and such that it read as a book, because essentially he had a habit of saying like I'm writing this in airport lodge and like I'm drinking wine and I'm just talking like he's kind of like I the line of code that he describes doesn't only have like the reason, like technical reason why he wrote it, but also the whole history behind of why he felt like that would be the good, like because that in that particular environment that gave him an idea of writing it that way. So sometimes it's very rewarding to see when you, especially when you're reading a code written by somebody much smarter than myself, then I get to peek into it and I'm just like, oh, that's how it works, that's how it all connects, and it's very interesting when it happens. Another challenging part actually sometimes is to explain to other people what is that you do, because software engineering is such a vast domain, but it looks pretty much the same from the outside. It's a bunch of people writing the code, or something that looks like code on the keyboard. But somebody who is like DBA, like database administrator, and me, like software engineer, would be doing very different things and know different things. And I like for certain things, they would come to me and I would come to the DBA for the help. So our domains like touch each other, but don't cross and overlap. We do different things. But from the outside, it's exactly the same. Oh, you muted, Andrew.
There we go. Unmuted. So if you had like advice for somebody that was just jumping into software engineering, like here's what is going to be your biggest challenge, what would that advice be?
I think the biggest challenge is that because it's a vast domain and it might be frightening and it might feel like somebody needs to learn all of that, all of the JavaScript frameworks, all of the different programming languages and operating systems and databases. And I don't think that it's feasible for anybody to know all of that. So I think the most crucial advice I would see is that don't be afraid and try to navigate in that huge space towards what you either like the most, or you get you doing it the best, or it's like feels the most natural. Just because in my experience, there are different paths that lead people into software development, and it doesn't make. At least I couldn't say that one of the paths is better than the others. So if you're doing something that's not following the curriculum, or somebody else who like write the blog post and saying like that's the right way to go and learn about like get into the profession, it's totally fine, because I've seen people from all different backgrounds and ways of lives who eventually found their place in the profession.
Awesome.
So just don't be, I guess, overwhelmed by it, because sometimes there are so many courses online and everything, it could just be frightening because you don't even know where to start. My point is like it doesn't matter much. Start anywhere, whenever you whatever feels most natural.
Nice. So we got another viewer. So if you're just jumping on the call or on the stream, I guess you can jump into the chat. There's an anonymous Q&A if you have just a anonymous question that you want to ask. And yeah, we're happy to have you. We've got Lex here with us. Lex is a professional software engineer, talking about his experience and just kind of answering questions. So Lex, you've been with HighTechU for a little while. What's maybe one of the interesting projects that you've seen that a student's done that you were like, wow, that's really cool to come out of the teen years?
It's actually, I could say that most of them were like that. So some of them were following footsteps that I would expect it. For example, there was one that financial planner that would help somebody to plan for the education and figure out, like, essentially balance the budget, which is there is a it's a class of software that companies use, governments use, people use. So I would have, like, this is something that I would have expected to see. There was a project like that. It was pretty reasonably well done. So I think it was interesting for me to see that somebody who would come with fresh ideas to the space that reasonably explored by other software engineers. Still were some fresh takes on that one, specifically about like how to simplify it, because there is a lot of information again. But some of them, the projects were the things that I would have never thought of as an ideas from the last cohort. That were the one that would recommend the places to meet. And just the problem that I didn't consider myself, but after it was explained, I was just like, yeah, that's a good idea. And certainly, maybe not a separate project, but as a feature on some of the like mapping software would totally make perfect sense, and people would probably use it and say like, that's a great idea to have. So that was great. And another one was about the registering the people with the essentially register whoever has the kit to help with the drug overdose.
Oh yeah, the naloxone kit one.
Yes, the naloxone kit project. That was something that I think is very important and a huge project, and it just surprised me as well, like how it's not something that you would normally see kind of like, well, this is just a toy project. I just want to learn how to write software. Something with a serious connotation to it and actual consideration. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We've seen this iteration, right, where people have made some very cool projects that were really defined by us, especially that first cohort that we ran that was really focused around social networks. But now, when we allowed students to really explore and build something with only the stipulation that it's something that teens would use on Vancouver Island, it really just exploded, like the different things that were there.
Yes, and I could add from the like value in HighTechU is that you have some of like ground services set up already, such that you narrow that vast space of the design decisions that need to be made to something that's more to let the developers focus on their idea and not stressing too much about like, am I choosing the right library or the right language or how I'm going to deploy it. So because there is a team that supporting teams doing that, they could focus on the idea. And I saw a lot more focus on the idea of this of discussions around how do we navigate from one page to another such that it makes sense, and such that, like, for example, in Naloxone Kit, there was a lot of things in consideration. Say like, well, this is the emergency situation, so the screen should be simple, not overloaded with information, huge text, plain colors. That just because that was how the team saw it the best to deliver the message.
Yeah, and it's interesting now too because we're trying to figure out how we can make that process even easier without defining what the students have to use. And so for our next cohort, we're looking at integrating Bootstrap and Vue.js into it. So like having some libraries and frameworks that are in there that if they want to use it, they can, but they don't have to. Which is kind of an interesting take on it. Instead of saying, here's all the things you can do, it's like, here are all of the tools that are available for you. If you want to use them, awesome. If you don't want to use them and you want to build it all yourself, then you can. And I'm actually interested, Lex, do you think that there's more value in sort of as a junior software developer, so somebody just or pre-junior that's just getting into the field of software development, do you think there's more value in sort of learning how to do it from scratch, or is there more value in sort of understanding how frameworks work? Like, where do you is it a balance between the two?
I think it really depends on the people. For some people, it would be easier to. The challenge that if you start from scratch, then you only can produce very simple things for the first months, which don't look anything at all like the application that you use all the time. That could be discouraging for a lot of people. On the other hand, if you build from the very rich frameworks, then you write a couple of lines of code that you just googled on through Stack Overflow, and you got something that works. And then you faced with the challenge that you want to change it and you don't exactly understand how it works. So that is another problem, that you come to the something looking really good and working really fast, but then when you need to make smaller changes to it, you find yourself in the situation when you could get lost because you don't know how to actually look inside of what the framework is doing. So I think it's like, the people have two different ways of explaining things, and it's just up to the personality which one works the best. One is explaining that how the final solution organized step by step, and the other way is explaining how it got built in historical perspective, like including sometimes describing all of the other approaches that were taken but didn't lead to anything, which is two valid ways to explain it, to explain certain concept and how this complex system operates. Yeah, and it's just different people benefit from the different ways of explaining. Same is with learning. I find that for some people, it's and it's not it's hard to predict. So there is no like gender or anything like that. That, like I said, like, well, those people would do that better than that. It's totally like up to the individuals. In my experience, at least, I didn't see any correlation with that way. But I've seen people who would maybe if you remember how the way you were building Lego blocks, then if you ever played with Lego, that would inform your particular take on it. Because I know that some people would take that instruction and build the full set first, and then start playing with it. While the others would start building it, and then once they already have something functional, they start playing with it little tiny bit. Maybe they build the figurines first, and then they like the figurines walk around the set and complete building it. So this I think should correlate with how people later on learn software engineering, for example, because either you would like, it's like, I think it's how important for you to feel that satisfaction, because it's very important for the learners that you have that feedback of you're doing something right, something's running, something's working. It's huge actually. So it's software engineering, because you don't have physical things, so you need something out there that actually works. So it didn't just write some words that don't make sense. It actually the application ties together. So how important to you is to have something that's already you can interact with, use early on. Because if you're building everything from scratch, it's going to take a while till you get to that full Lego set. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's true. And it's funny, we just did a workshop last Friday, which was focused around sort of launching a website in a half an hour. So one of our awesome staff, who's also a GitHub campus expert and advisor, basically showed how to launch a website, like a pure just markdown using GitHub pages. And so it was in a half an hour. We were able to show people how to deploy a website, which was kind of cool. So in terms of where students should go, so you talked about Stack Overflow as like a place for students to find sort of code snippets that they can use. Are there other places that are good locations if people have questions around tech that they want answered, aside, of course, from this awesome Q&A corner that we're running now during this kind of crazy COVID crisis?
There was a long debate of what the best Linux distribution is. And it finally was solved with the answer is that the best is the one that your nearest Linux guru uses. So I think that's the same with lots of those tech questions and knowledge hubs. It's networking is still an important part of it, because even in Stack Overflow, which is one of the best known platforms for asking questions, finding answers, there is certain ways and sometimes tricks and bits that would allow you to get your question answered faster, more correct. There is certain ways you can search it. So having somebody who would help navigate the UI of the Stack Overflow, for example, which is not that intuitive actually. If you consider like all the different levels, and sometimes you can get like post questions unpublished and you don't know what that means. Anyways, so what I'm saying is that there are lots of different platforms, and actually one thing that I would recommend is that if you know more than English as a language, it's very beneficial to join because essentially in each sector of the internet there is a programming hub, probably like the most developed site, and where developers aggregate, and it actually helps to read in two different languages how the people explain, because also different mindset, different ways to explain it. Sometimes it just clicks. So for me, it was a big deal to be able not only look at what the English sector of the internet has, but also what like the French and German. Sometimes I even use like the translator because I don't know all the languages that good. But sometimes you cannot find the good explanation of why certain thing works in English. You could try find something else in the different language.
Totally.
Like answer to the same question.
Yeah.
But essentially, not these days when the search engines are that good. Usually you have an error from compiler. You just copy paste into the browser, and you will probably have relevant enough explanation of how to fix it.
Yeah, it's true. So do you think that if you're sort of learning how to learning how to do some of these kind of complex things that you are needing to do in order to deploy software in 2020, you can figure out most of it just from kind of surfing things like Stack Overflow and just Googling questions and stuff like that?
Oh, you can. You totally can. First of all, because there is a lot of things that you can do for free now. So you could play around with that. Like AWS, for example, has free tier when you can create a lot of stuff there for free. I think it still need create a Carton file though, because and it's dangerous because you can accidentally step outside of it. There is no safeguards. It's like unfortunately. So take it with the caution. And then some of the things like Google Cloud, they have a different way of setup. That's nothing free, but then when you sign up as saying you're a student, they give you like virtual several $1,000s you can spend just on there. Also experiment with that. Also danger because at one point you run out of this money and they start to charge you for real money. But anyway, so I'm saying like you totally can in this current environment learn everything just from the browsing the forums, reading the textbooks and some guides that people put online. However, it's up to the different people of how they learn. For some people, that would be more feasible, and for some people, it would be less. So don't get discouraged if it doesn't work for you, because it's totally normal. And I don't think that especially like that environment, I said it's vast, it's also very fragmented. So you will find a blog post saying like how to deploy a Node.js application using React framework onto the Heroku. And this is a lot of keywords which kind of nicely line up together. And if your application is not like on React but on different framework, it's not going to apply to your use case. And this is very challenging because you wouldn't be able to find the guide for exact your product or whatever the code base you're working with. So you need to have to develop essentially that skill when you're like, oh yeah, that part doesn't apply to me, skip that and read about the part that does apply to you to identify which part doesn't apply or not. Take some experience already and build up, because there wouldn't be, unfortunately, I guess, comprehensive course materials that would guide you through that. There will be like blog posts saying like, I did it with this language, this framework, deployed it there, and using this database. And you could do exactly like that. Sometimes it's just helpful to go and like follow the steps of like copy paste the comments that they have in the blog post and do it yourself with the exact same technology and then with the same end result. But most of the time, you still just read that and figure out that line I was missing because everything else just doesn't apply.
Yeah, it's true. So do you so you're talking about a lot of things there, and depending on who's on the chat right now, there's different experiences there. So you hear a lot of these. If you search for I want to build a website, and you're going to hear these things like Node and Mongo and Stacks and all the rest of this stuff. Where's like the easiest place from your perspective for people to start if they're interested in just like exploring a little bit on their own with something that they can, like, by the end of a day, they can have some cool thing that's that's deployed?
Well, it depends on what the cool thing they want. Like the static site in 30 minutes is pretty cool, and you could do that, and you can build multiple pages and link them together, and have something like about like 40 years ago, very like cutting edge writer were exploring with interactive books, which were the books when in the like you read the page, and at the bottom of the page there would be like, if you think the character should do that, go to the page X, and if you think that otherwise, go to the other page. So for example, with just the thing that was shown in like with GitHub IO and hosting the pages there, you could do something like that already in a day and have a story and kind of like text adventure game.
Totally.
Yeah, so totally. So that so you could do that, but if it's not something that interests you, then maybe that's not the right place to start. I know I'm not really answering the question of like
No,
what
it's
would be the
okay.
best place to start, but I'm just like I've seen people coming from so very different backgrounds. One of my high school friends actually did not want to do anything with the computer. He didn't like that as well as me, so that's why I guess we were friends. But he was into electronics, like soldering bits together and trying to make something work in the physical world. And eventually, he just found that he needed to. He was too hard for him, to taking too much time to figure out how to do the layout of the thing that he's soldering together. So he found the software that does that. And then he wanted to change something because it wasn't doing the layout the way he wanted, or didn't took something into account. So he started to write scripts for that software. And eventually he also ended up writing a lot of code, which is totally fine. He was pretty much not even like thinking about the languages at all. And on frameworks, and never actually considering himself for going towards software development profession at all. He was just like, well, I want the software to do that. So like, I don't care about the quality of the code, the source control, all of that, the frameworks and database, all of the things he didn't knew for like years, while actually writing a lot of code already.
Do you feel like that's the big difference, is that between like building software, being a software developer, I guess, and being a software engineer, is you're more focused on those processes and making sure it's clean code and that you're using things the right way and it's well documented, stuff like that?
Yes, totally. Especially if you want to like be paid for the job that's done that way, then yeah, you should. That software development lifecycle is pretty important to understand and follow the practices. I guess what I'm just saying is that you don't have to start there, especially considering we have a lot of open source projects, and sometimes like I've seen people that came from the game mods when they just tried something to change the way the game operates, which is also usually very like complicated and not well documented code that just does something hard to maintain. But it was fun to write for the developer who did it, and it's a good starting point.
Do you think it's really important for people to like have a portfolio of their growth through, even if the thing that they made they're not super happy with, but it's something that they did that was really kind of cool to them, like doing one of those game mods, having that up on their GitHub profile?
I don't think it's super important. It would. I don't know. It was at certain time people were saying like, well, the CV and resume is that people just going to look at LinkedIn profile and GitHub and just deduct it from there. And I haven't seen it happening. Last time I was changing jobs, I applied for the job, and I was so surprised that one of the people actually went to my GitHub and during the interview asked like, "Well, you have this project on GitHub. Like, tell me more about that one." This is the first time it happened, even though my GitHub is more than 10 years old, and I have a lot of projects. Some of them dead, some of them are still more or less alive and open source. Anyways, there was like I don't know, probably 100 interviews I've been through in these years. There's only one time that somebody actually clicked on that link that I have in my CV that says, this is my GitHub profile, and had a question related to that. So I think like having the portfolio is good. Like at that time, at least this one time out of 100, roughly, it helped. But I don't think it's super important.
Awesome. I love different perspectives of that. You definitely hear people say that put everything in there to show growth. But it's interesting that you, as a professional software engineer, have only ever had that happen once, where somebody's checked your GitHub profile.
Yeah, because especially like, people are still busy. They don't check the like. And I've been interviewed in big companies as well. And the people walk into the room with the printed resume at hand, and this is the first time they see it because they just grab it from the printer in like the half hallway. So they literally seen it for like 15 seconds. Obviously, they didn't click on any links or anything. It's like that's all that they have.
Totally.
And they're not going to look after they walk out of the room because they have other meetings and interviews and everything. They're just like, that's it. Like the hour of the interview they spent with the CV, that's the only time they look at that.
Yeah. Do you find that your interviews that you've gone to are more technical, or are they more focused around your ability to function like interpersonally in the office?
The good interviews are always less technical, but most of the interviews they still quite technical. And the worst interview always the ones that have the list of prepared questions, and it's the same questions they ask ask everybody. And you see that the interviewer is not interested in asking the question. He's not going to pay much attention to the answer that's been delivered because he's just like, oh yeah, that's like that other person told me, and then like 5 other people. So you like have 5 different options, I guess, to answer it, and you immediately fall into one of those categories, and the person is like not paying attention to the rest of the answer at all. So it's either like the technical that's being more innovative in terms of like interactive, I guess, on the spot an interview interacts with. But it's you'll find it in smaller companies more often than the big ones because the big ones have the process and nobody enjoys it, but they have it.
Yeah, it's true. So I'm interested in sort of getting your thoughts on this process as a mentor. What do you think of this kind of live stream, just off the cuff kind of Q&A? Are you feeling this? Are you digging it? Are you feeling like you wish you had other questions that were prepared, stuff like that? Like, what do you think of this so far? I'm interested too in people that are on the stream right now. If you're interested in providing like feedback, like the quality's terrible, or oh, you guys just seem like you're droning on. Like, but from you, Lex, like, what do you think of the format?
I think it's good. Maybe I guess I would be more comfortable if there would be like a couple more mentors, so we have more of a variety of opinions. Because I, for example, feel like, well, it's just like I took a non-standard path into the software engineering, and I've seen probably more people who done that than I've seen people who actually went to the computer science and then into the career like more or less expected. And some people who went to the computer science degree and then got the job way before finishing and then never got back to the university to actually finish the degree, which is also it's so common that I guess also could be considered standard path into the industry already. Anyway, so I could offer my view and my experience, but I guess it would have helped if we had more variety.
Totally. Do you think, because it sounds like a lot of people are actually willing to just ask the questions, and one of the reasons we wanted to use the IBM platform was because you could ask sort of questions in private, but maybe we can move back to some of the more popular platforms. I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Oh, I think sometimes maybe people wouldn't be feeling comfortable asking like hard questions. I don't know. I could think of several questions that I would ask myself only if it was anonymous platform.
Yeah.
So
you think there's still value in like having it on a platform like this where you can ask them in
I think so.
a more private area. Still trying to figure out how all that works. I was able to send my test question, but nothing else has come through yet. Okay, so it's 12:50. We got a couple of people on the call, or on this stream. So I'm interested from the folks that are on the stream right now. Any questions? You can throw it in the chat. We'd love to know if you've got any questions for me or for Lex or just about life or tech in general. We cannot answer the meaning of life, though. All right, I'm just going to see if I switch to this. Oh, yeah, the desktop audio still works. So I'll go back over there.
And I guess I should add that sometimes the challenge in the following the online guide, some like blog post of how to do something, is troublesome because the guides are wrong quite often, and you just doing something that the person said they did, and it worked, and it does not. And it could be very frustrating because sometimes they just forgot to mention that, like, oh, you need to have Docker installed or something like that.
Yeah, that's true, right? You don't think about it if you are creating these things sometimes, that people won't realize you need to do that. True. So it doesn't look like there's any questions that are coming for the viewers. So I think maybe we might just finish things off. But before we do, Lex, I just want to say thank you so much for being on as our inaugural mentor for our first Q&A corner. We're going to be piloting this all week and trying it out and seeing what works and what doesn't, and the best day and the best time and stuff like that. But we're going to be doing this again tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday at noon. And we're going to have different mentors that are in to sort of give their answers to questions and talk about some things with us, which is going to be really exciting. So definitely don't miss Tech Bites and the Q&A corner. And then just Tech Bites in general. These Tech Bites sessions are going to be happening fairly often. We had our first one last Friday. We're going to be having our next session, I think, next week. Actually, no, we're going to be having our next session on Wednesday with our friends from the White Hatter. So definitely something that you do not want to miss. But for everybody that was able to make it on the call, thank you so much for making it on the call. Lex, thanks so much to you for being our first mentor, and hopefully we will see everybody on a future Q&A corner. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for organizing it. Good day.